Hi, and welcome back to the Night Sky Knitting Podcast. My name is Rachel, I am your host, and I am a knitter, normally based in Ottawa, Canada, but today coming to you from Toronto, Canada. And this podcast is my chatty outlet to talk all things crafts, but actually almost always just knitting. Today is February 21st. It is a Monday, which is a holiday in Ontario called Family Day. And all patterns and yarns will be linked in the down bar below. So I think that's my intro. I think that's everything I normally say and all the important relevant information. I'm so happy to have you here today. The decision to film was pretty spontaneous. I'm just in a good mood. I'm just happy, and I wanted to talk about knitting and catch up with you guys because it's been 3 or 4 weeks. Anyone who watched my last episode might be thinking, wait, this background is the same background as last time when you said that you were leaving. Yeah, so I was at my mother's house in Toronto, and then the day after I filmed, I went back to Ottawa for school and work for 2.5, 3 weeks, and then it's now my reading week, which is kind of like Canadian spring break, but it's not famous for partying. It's called reading week because it's when you catch up on all the work you haven't been doing recently. And so I'm back to spend time with my family. So I thought I'd chat. The weather it's been really nice today. It was really sunny earlier and just slightly above freezing, and it was so fun walking around and seeing everybody, and some people were in shorts, some people were still in their heavy puffer coats, and how in spring in a wintertime climate or in a cold climate, the right when it starts to get a little bit warm, people's outfits span the entire spectrum, which I think is quite fun. So to talk about knitting, the theme of this episode is casting on with wild abandon, and then also suffering issues that absolutely could have been avoided had I thought about it even a little bit or planned even a little bit in advance. So that's what's going on today. My very first finished object is a sock. I don't even have the finished and my only finished object. I don't even have both socks. I just have the one. And I finished, well, actually not even fully finished, but here's the knitting is done on this one Magic Toadstool sock, which I think it's so sweet. I love it. I enjoyed knitting this. Perfect amount of color work. I love the colors. I knit this in a mono Chosky. I've talked about this. I feel like that yarn I've mentioned in every single one of my podcast episodes for maybe 6 months at this point. It's a no nylon sock yarn, but I think might be really good for a lightweight summer shawl or summer garment, or maybe for babies. I think I might try and knit myself a little summer top in it later, but not in these colors. And then a little bit of Sandnes Garn Sisu for the contrast stock, and I'm going to, once I'm done knitting the other pair, duplicate stitch in the little white dots that go on the toadstool caps, on the mushroom caps. You have the option of doing 3-strand in a row color work to get those on there, but at the time, I started knitting these when I had COVID and my brain was I was sick and I could do 2-stranded color work, but I was not in a mental place with the brain fog to try 3-color work. And I'm really excited to learn how to do duplicate stitch. I feel like it's a very useful skill, and I've never done it before, and so this gives me the opportunity to try. I knit these on a 2.25mm needle, and I obviously also have to weave in ends. But yeah, I'm thrilled with these. I'm currently working on the other one. They've been good fun. It's a slip stitch, pretty standard slip stitch heel. And yeah. This is kind of taken a bit of a back seat though. And I feel like I need to maybe give an update on the Sandnes Garn Sisu situation. So if you watched my last episode, I knit another full pair of colorwork socks, which were the Blooming Lavender socks, also by Stone Knits. There was a sale many months ago, and I got the 2 patterns together on sale, entirely out of Sandnes Garn Sisu. And I went on this whole rant about how I found Sisu to be such a splitty yarn. It was such a nightmare to work with. It was constantly untwisting or unplying the entire time I was working with it. and I just had such a frustrating time, and I probably wouldn't have continued the project if they were not a gift knit, and if I didn't love my friend enough to soldier on, because they were really just the perfect colors and the perfect pattern for her, and it was her birthday. And then I posted this, and then one person, I'm pretty sure M. Fleming, I hope I gave credit to the right person, but one person commented saying, you might be knitting against the ply or the twist, and maybe try from the other end of the ball next time. And that was a light bulb moment for me. That kind of got the gears turning in the old noggin. And so important context, if you don't already know, I'm a left-handed knitter, and I don't just mean like a left-handed person who knits. I mean I knit with my left hand as my working, or my left needle as my working needle, and my right needle as my holding needle. So I knit everything flipped, or mirrored. It's also called mirror knitting. And that got me thinking, this person's comment, that maybe it's because I'm a left-handed knitter and I'm knitting against the twist and the ply, because it's assuming that I'm knitting in the opposite direction. And then a few days later, sure enough, one person also commented saying, I'm also a left-handed knitter, and I have found that to be true just for Sandnes yarns in general, just how they're manufactured. You know, it's meant to be ideal for a left-handed knitter and to be reinforced as you knit with the twist, but then I'm knitting with the opposite twist. And that's kind of what was happening. And then, sure enough, again, someone else commented very recently saying the exact same thing. So, I feel like I need to give a correction that I have arguably slandered Sandnes Sisu, and that if you're a right-handed knitter, which I think is the vast majority of you, you will not encounter any problems. If you're a left-handed knitter, maybe you will like me. I'm going to keep going. I still have a bit left, more than a bit actually. I'm going to use up my scraps because that is what we do, and maybe just not do color work because that absolutely made it worse. Just, you know, twisting the strands and catching floats and blah, 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 blah. And yeah, so that's an update on the Sandnes Sisu saga. And as you can see, it made a very darling contrast color. And for all of you who are not left-handed knitters, I do think that Sandnes Sisu is incredibly well priced, gorgeous color selection, and others have said it's very durable and that they don't have problems with it. So maybe a hot tip for you, and you know that you will not be competing with me at the very least to get your hands on it in the Toronto area or Ottawa area or whatever ships across Canada. So there you go. So this is my only finished object, and even then I still have to, like I said, weave in ends and duplicate stitch little dots. And I'm thrilled. I did a classic wedge toe. I've been having trouble with my toes. I keep knitting them too short, but I follow the pattern, and I don't have long toes. Like, I have very famously short, squat little toes. Sorry if that's too much information, but that's been happening on a lot of the socks I've been knitting for myself and for others. So I had to rip this back a couple times and just do the decreases more slowly. But yeah, got some ends to weave in, some dots to do, but my only finished object. I do my best to cast on the second sock as soon as possible to ward off second sock syndrome. And here's the second one. And like I said, I'm at my mother's house for break. And I tossed in the 2 balls of this and the whip to, you know, give myself options of stuff to knit on while I was here, and thinking, you know, once I finish the color work, the heel and the foot, I don't really need a chart or anything to go on while I knit, so it would be very good, you know, taking the bus yarn or taking to my boyfriend's house to knit while we watch TV yarn, you know, that kind of like conversational knitting. Except I didn't pack the sisu, the white sisu, for the stocks, and so this is as far as I can go without that yarn. And yeah, so that was poor organization and planning, foible number 1. Not that it, you know, this is not an urgent whip, but it was one of those things where I was like, okay, and now I just get the other contrast color. Oh, whoops. So yeah, those are my magic Toadstool socks. I'm hoping to finish them soon. What has occupied most of my time and attention, though, is also familiar to you if you watched last episode or even saw the thumbnail. It has been the... Oh, I just dropped it. don't know if you saw, that was probably off screen, but I just knocked a little sock over. It has been this bad boy. My anchor sweater, my boyfriend size, that I'm knitting for my boyfriend. I've been knitting this in Baroque Vintage DK, and I must say I really, really have been enjoying it. Here, this is the color Twilight, I think. Yeah, Twilight. And if it helps, the color number is 21184. This is I have a hank for demonstration purposes. That's the label, what it looks like. This is it in hank form. The anchor sweater. This has been occupying most of my time and attention with a couple notable, well, some fluff, couple notable exceptions. And I think I just significantly underestimated how much time it would take me to knit a men's large sweater on DK, which isn't even a small, it's not a very thin needle. It's not a very thin yarn. I've been knitting this on 4mm needles, and I did encounter a couple hiccups because, again, problems that come from a lack of organization and planning. I didn't knit a gauge swatch for this because I thought, I don't really have a good excuse. I just wanted to cast on, and I thought the yoke is rib anyway, and how off can I be? And normally I'm a little bit tighter than proper gauge with wool and wool blends, so I thought it'll be fine. And then I filmed my last podcast and then went back to Ottawa, and then it wasn't super safe to be out a lot of the time, so I spent a lot of time at home knitting this. And I was sitting on the couch with my roommate. We were hanging out. I was knitting this, and she said, my roommate said, "Oh, that's for your boyfriend?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I think that's going to be a little small, Rachel." And up until that point, I was maybe about here. Like, I'd passed sleeve separation, but not by, it's folding over. I'd passed sleeve separation by not by a ton. It was like, I don't know, like here, maybe. And I just thought it was because it was scrunched up on a shorter cable than the actual circumference of the sweater. But then I looked at it, and I really looked at it, and I realized, oh, she was right. So, tried to push down the panic, and I hustled upstairs and got out my ruler, and I checked my gauge, and I was 3 stitches too tighter than the specified gauge for this pattern. Cue panic. I was so upset because at that point I'd been knitting on this. This is my main project for I think at that point it'd been 3 or 4 weeks. And I'd been knitting a lot because everything was online for me. And it was just hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of stockinette around. The rib was actually significantly more fun than the stockinette in the round. I mean, it's been very good TV knitting or Zoom seminar knitting when I'm not really taking a lot of notes, where I can just drop it really quickly and then type a note and then not drop a cable or forget where I am in the chart or whatever. I was I knitted the math, and if I had 3 more stitches crammed into 4 inches or 10 centimeters than the suggested gauge, I did the math for the size that I was supposed to be knitting, and I think it meant that the sweater was going to be 8 or 10 inches narrower than it was supposed to for the size that I was supposed to be knitting. And I was like, I can't rip back and start over. Our anniversary is coming up. This has already taken me so long. I just I don't have the time to knit it again. So it went in the timeout corner, in the corner of shame, while I contemplated frogging it. I was like, why didn't you knit a size up? Why didn't you use another needle size? You know that you're a tight knitter. Just a lot of self-pity. And I was hit with the bad case of midwinter blues in general. It was February. Things weren't so good where I was living. And so I went in the timeout corner for a little bit while I mourned, and I cast on another project using a lot of stash and was really excited about that. I don't have it with me because, spoiler alert, I'll talk about it in a little bit and I'll insert a couple photos, but it's going to be frogged. And after a couple of days, I worked up the nerve to do my favorite as a knitter who, even though she consistently has gauge issues, likes to cast on without swatching, which is I did a spicy mid-project block. So I did an aggressively blocked it and pinned it Waited a couple days for it to dry, checked my gauge, we're fine. I'm maybe half a stitch off. This grew so much widthwise, not lengthwise at all, but widthwise grew so much. I think you can even maybe see it in comparison to the last time I held this up on video. It fits so much more nicely. It's kind of drapey, it's cute, I don't know. I don't know if you can tell the line from where I just kept knitting after I blocked it or what, but yeah, after blocking it grew like 2.5, maybe 3 stitches and is almost bang on in terms of gauge. And so had I gone up a needle size, it would have been too big. And also, I think maybe just not as warm. Like it's. I think this is a good fabric too. But had I knit a gauge swatch before I started, I would not have lost like 4 or 5 days to my little spiral and then having to put the project on hold and then block it. So that kind of put me behind schedule. And also I was enamored with this white fluffy stash project. And then with maybe being a little bit of a bad girlfriend and taking a break from this. But from then on, I finished the body to the length that I asked. Sorry, the length that I asked him to tell me how long he thinks it should be from the outer arm. He measured one of his sweaters, and I did it to that. A hint, that also goes awry later on in the project. And then I started on the sleeves, and I, picked up the stitches for the sleeves, and I knit like maybe an inch, and then I kind of put it off to the side because I started something else new and shiny. And then I asked him, oh, would you please measure a sleeve of one of your favorite sweaters and let me know how long it was. And because I've been knitting so many, I prefer things to be kind of bracelet length. All of my shirts are constantly rolled and pushed up as it is. And I've been knitting a lot of 3/4 length or puff, like just past the elbow length things. But I kind of forgot how long a sleeve normally is for a full length sweater. Plus, his arms are longer than mine. And so he said, maybe like 18.5, 19 inches. And this was maybe 9 days before our anniversary. And I was like, oh no, I don't know if I have enough time. So cue frantically knitting this all of the time. And then I came back to Toronto and I had him try it on once I had finished one sleeve and the body. And you guys, it's comically small. It's comically short. The chest, this rib part that's already been blocked, fits beautifully. Really flatters him. He thought it was super comfortable. But it was comically short, the sleeve and the body. The sleeve is my fault. His specification was correct. I mean, it's all my fault. But what happened was I was knitting this the night before my train. And I measured it. And I thought, okay, I have about, 1.5 inches more of stockinette to go before I start the ribbing. And then the next day, I was on the train and I measured it again because, why not? And all of a sudden, I was only 1/2 inch away from the length at which I was supposed to start the ribbing. And I thought, oh, it was just me, almost 1 a.m, very tired, I measured wrong. So I knit another 1/2 inch and I started the ribbing, and the sleeve's 2 inches short. So, oops. The body is short because I asked him to tell me how long it should be from the armpit down, but at the time he was wearing a drop shoulder, much looser sweater, and I didn't think about how that would affect the measurement. And so, also because it's tight right now, because the bottom half hasn't blocked out yet, it's kind of stretching and riding up more, which obviously is affecting things too. So this needs another 2 inches in this sleeve. This needs another 3 inches in the body. And I did a tubular / Italian bind off because that's what the pattern says, and also because I love him and he's worth it, and it's super stretchy and it's a beautiful finish. That means I have to unpick the sleeve, and more importantly, or more frighteningly, I want to give away the exact stitch count, but this is almost 300 stitches. It's about 300 stitches. I have to unpick sewn bind off for 300 stitches, and then also 1.5 inches of rib, and then knit another 2 inches, and then do it all again. So we've decided to postpone our anniversary gift exchange because he got me a really lovely, incredibly thoughtful gift, but it's made to order, and it's not going to arrive in time either. And in fact, today is actually our anniversary. It's the evening now, and because it's a day off, it's a provincial holiday. He had the day off, and I had the day off because it's break, and we had a lovely dinner last night and a wonderful brunch this morning. We went on a beautiful walk, and it almost felt like spring, and I had a good day. I'm in a good mood. I had a good day. But obviously, he didn't get the sweater for our anniversary because today's our anniversary, and I'm holding the sweater before you right now. So, this brings me to my first request for help or advice of the video, which is, what's the best way to undo this ribbing? Do I just cut it? Or do I painstakingly undo each individual stitch? Do I just like cut back to a certain row instead? Any advice on how to unpick a tubular / Italian / sewn bind off is greatly appreciated. So thank you in advance for that, because it'll be a labor of love, and I've come to terms. I've had a few days to accept that this is my future, unpicking it and redoing it, and I'm okay with that. Because at this point, the ribbing is more exciting to me than this, and I actually quite enjoy the process of a tubular bind off, just like I really enjoy Kitchener stitching. So yeah, I don't mind it. I just mind having to undo it, if that makes sense. So any advice on how to unpick quickly and efficiently, and in a way that's not going to give me a headache and make me cry, the tubular bind off, please let me know. I will be very, very grateful. So that is the big whip update, and that's what's been taking up most of my time, and just so many issues that I should have seen coming. On the other hand, I'm still enjoying it. I'm not very upset. So yeah, but I love knitting. I have time. It's not anything particularly difficult, like when I had to fix frog and fix half fisherman's rib, which is still the reason why I see half fisherman's rib projects or brioche projects, and I think no, and it'll be okay. So from there, I actually cast on the project I was talking about before. I talked about this briefly in my last video at the very end, but I had this idea in my head. So I've had the 2 balls of drop swish in an off-white color since maybe July 2020, and I was going to knit myself a hat with them when I was just a beginner, when I was still kind of relearning, when I still knit right-handed and English style, and that never happened. And so I've just had these 2 balls of drops air that I haven't been able to figure out what to do with for, at this point, like a year and a half. And so last month I bought 2 more balls because that's all they had in store, and I will eventually buy another ball to knit myself a sweater, a white fluffy kind of neutral one. And I had the idea that I wanted to do stripes of stockinette and stripes of seed stitch kind of going down, and I would just, freestyle it. So first I did that raglan style, because that felt like a more comfortable way to do increases to ensure a fit that I was happy with, since I was kind of making up my own gauge and making up my own pattern. And the fit was really nice. I made it pretty much all the way to where I would have separated for sleeves, but I didn't like the look of how the seed stitch stripe looked with the way that raglan style increases kind of change the direction of the stitches. So, I'll include a photo, but I didn't take very many photos. I think I just took the one, and I don't have it with me because it's in Ottawa. But it would be, kind of straight across the chest, and then you'd hit the line with the raglan, and then because of the increases, it would kind of go up like this, and like this on each shoulder, so it was very geometric. And at first I thought, oh, that's cool. But then I kept knitting it, and I kind of didn't like the way that it looked, but I thought that's fine, it's not a deal breaker. Then I got to sleeve separation, and I realized that if I wanted to continue with the seed stitch stripes, it would look off from the yoke compared to every other stripe, which wouldn't have had that kind of directional stitch issue. And really what I wanted from the beginning was actually the look of a circular yoke with seed stitch stripes. And I thought, you know what, why don't you do what you actually want, Rachel? So I frogged it back to the neck and just kind of started making up my own. I looked at a couple patterns of circular yoke increased sweaters that I've done in the past, and I was like, okay, well, based on my gauge, but I didn't do any math. I think that's a really important thing. I was just too lazy, and I was kind of, at this point, really stress knitting, because it was so dark and cold, and blah, 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 Ottawa, and blah, 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 school, and blah, 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 and I was stress knitting, and I just was like, and I just did not stop to take the time to measure my gauge, do the calculation for, which I actually don't, now that I've done it once and done it very poorly and did a bad job, I now see that it actually, like, I could do this again in the future and do it right. I really did like the look of the seed stitch stripes in circular yoke, but I didn't do nearly enough increases. And also, I didn't like the look of increases messing up the seed stitch, so that meant that for large panels, I just kind of couldn't do the increases. And that meant that when I got to sleeve separation again, and I counted the amount of stitches I had, and I did the math based on my gauge and blah, 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 and for sleeves and blah, 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 it would have been 23 or 26 inch chest circumference, which is comically small. And that's also, I'm a 34/86 centimeter bust circumference, so that it just wouldn't have fit. And I was like looking at it, and I had it at this point like on over my, like I was wearing it almost like a little capelet as I'm like sitting there doing the math in a notebook at like 11:30 p.m. on like a Wednesday, trying to find some way that I could suddenly make the math work. And also I had already, because I kind of wanted like a little bit of space at the armpit, so it wasn't like this, I realized this here and then could do just a bunch of increases here. Like I realized this when we were here, and I didn't want it, and it was already like 1.5 inches lower than my armpit, and I wanted it to be kind of cropped anyway, so that meant that if I kept going, the point is the fit was like comically off. It was really funny. And I saw the whole thing as an experiment anyway. It was meant to kind of get my gears turning and have my brain think about things that weren't going on in my life at the time. And I'm fine, everything's fine, don't worry you guys. But I just laughed. It was so funny, and I wasn't heartbroken, I wasn't like that upset, because it was an experiment. I already frogged all the way back once. I learned so much from it. I feel a lot less intimidated about freestyling patterns in the future, because I think I now know how to do the gauge. I figured it out, and I think I will probably try this sweater again at some point in the future. But I think for now, what I'm going to do with that yarn is instead just do like a plain, loose, flowy, romantic raglan and have it be one of those neutral, everyday, toss on and look decently put together sweaters and be comfy and cozy, because Drops Air is wonderfully soft. So I'm looking forward to casting on that eventually. So that was my first cast on. Went nowhere though. And then I went back to my anchor sweater and knitting it a bunch, but then I got kind of bored of knitting just stockinette, because I was doing just stockinette on the foot of this and just stockinette on the body of this, and I wanted something more interesting. I really like having one mindless and one mindful, textured, interesting project at a time. And I've also been just kind of so in love with my stash recently. And I want to articulate this properly. I do want to work down my stash. I think that's true of a lot of people on the knitting, Instagram, YouTube space. We've been talking about that a lot as I think a whole, which is a very common sentiment right now. But I think there's kind of associated with that it's kind of like you're resisting a bunch of impulses in order to work through stash. The impulse to avoid the new and shinies, to get through your whips, to avoid new cast-ons, to avoid buying new yarns. And it's kind of like a virtuous thing, you know? Use what we have, waste not, want not, etc., etc. And like, I'm so fully in support of that, but the reason why I've been knitting with my stash so much recently is because I've been just so in love with the yarns. I've been so looking forward to casting on projects with them, and I haven't been really drawn to new yarns. I mean, yes, I have, but not the same way where I've actively had to resist buying things. I've just been like waiting to use some of these yarns for so many months, and then I'm just kind of sick of waiting and just kept casting on stuff, like the Drops Air, the white stuff. So fluffy, so nice, really looking forward to wearing that one day. Cast that on because I just couldn't wait to cast on and use that and get it out of my stash and onto my body. And so this is the same sentiment. This is my beloved. Is that a good, can you see that well? Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, look at those cables. Oh my goodness, I love them. Okay, this is the Snowy Forest sweater by Midori Hirose. And I have so much to say about this. I'm gonna try and remember all of it. First, this is a very size inclusive pattern. I wanna make sure that I tell you guys that. This is available from a 2XS to a 6XL. So most bodies should be able to wear this and find that it's geared towards their measurements. there's a cropped version and a long full-length version, and then there's the one sample was knit with like a sport weight plus a mohair, a lace weight mohair, and then one was knit with an Aran. And I'm knitting this in like a worsted Aran weight yarn. I think you can kind of see that from the size of the strand. And I'm enjoying this so much. It's great. I have pretty much been following this exactly to pattern, except normally this has more of the chunky double folded collar is much more of a statement in it. I went down 2 or 3 needle sizes for it to make it just a little bit more subtle and cinched in and less of a boat neck. And then I also did a few less. I'm really overthinking English today and grammar, but I did a little bit fewer. I didn't do as many rounds as the pattern called for, because I got to a certain point, I looked at it and I thought, yeah, that's good. And then, because I really, really like back of neck shoulder shaping to kind of raise the back of a garment, and I don't like it when it's a little bit choky in the front, I did like 2 baby short rows in the back. I just kind of guessed and improvised and added those there, which probably is going to actually do nothing, but I was too scared to kind of try and do like more than that and maybe mess it up and make the fit worse, but I wanted to try something. So I did 2 baby short rows. From there, I've been following the chart exactly. Oh, one other modification, which I mean barely can be called a modification, is I'm knitting this at a slightly tighter gauge. I think maybe 1 to half a stitch tighter intentionally. I did that. I chose a needle size that would give me that, having knit with this yarn before and known that another needle size would give me a proper gauge, because I wanted a little bit of a tighter, warmer fabric and a little bit more. I wanted it to be a little bit smaller, but I didn't want to go down a size, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't want to go down a garment size, because I want this to be, it's my hair. I love that I have enough hair now that I can shed on things, because for so long I was bald. I want this to be kind of a more put together kind of sweatshirt type thing, like loose and oversized, but not wearing a cotton sweatshirt to class. You know, on the days when I have 8:30 classes and it's really, really cold and I just want to like pull on a big loose thing and be comfy and cozy, but not look super schlubby, that is what I'm hoping this will be, a big chunky cabled pullover. And I'm thinking what I'm going to do is do the yoke, separate for sleeves, finish the cable, I almost said chable, finish the cable. It's almost a fun hat. I think I might sit like this for the next little while to give my arms a break. Finish the cable chart and then put the body on hold and knit the sleeves. And then I'm thinking, and I reserve the right to change my mind, I'm thinking I will knit the body until I run out of yarn. I'm hoping I can maybe get like a hip length or just past the hips, like covers my butt length sweater, and wear it as a cozy oversized guy with maybe leggings or loose jeans for those kinds of days when you don't want to have to think about your outfit, but you don't want to look disheveled. So that's what my hope is. I might try it on and then actually end up cropping it like I crop everything else, but this winter I've really been craving that kind of big, oversized, long wool garment. I still love my cropped at the waist wool sweaters, but sometimes I want something bigger and warmer for those incredibly frigid January days when the wind chill brings it to like -40 and every part of your exposed skin hurts, and I want to be warm. And I have a really nice outfit in mind planned for this, which hopefully I'll be able to show you soon. But yeah, so this guy, really, so I don't have a lot of experience knitting cables. Also, I'm sorry for how long it's going to turn out that this video is, looking at the timestamp at the top. I don't have a lot of experience knitting cables. I've done some very small cables in socks and on the Hydra headband by Fiber Tales, and I enjoyed that, but I have generally been quite intimidated by cables and I've put off trying them. And so this has been a very good, not first time cable, I actually think this would still be a fine first time cable pattern, but beginner cable pattern. Because the yarn is so big, the gauge is so big, the needles are so big, you really see what you're doing. You don't have a bunch of different cables going at different intervals. The instructions are really, really clear, and the cables are not wild, and they're just fun. And then after, each new round, I think the way that the increases are done are both really just murder on my wrists, but also really interesting. I don't know if that's normal for a cable pattern, and I don't want to give it away, but I thought that that was cool. It's very clean. And it's memorizable, which I appreciate because I've been watching a lot of TV, and this has been decent TV knitting. When I get tired of the anchor sweater, I just cannot anymore, and I need to do a couple rounds of something more interesting. What else do I want to say about this? Well, I've been really happy that I'm able to spit splice again. I've been working with so many yarns where that just hasn't been possible, like my brushed alpaca silk, or this superwash synthetic blend, or superwash wool or sock yarn where that just hasn't been possible, and it's just so much easier. Spit splice, we're done, great. Super, super subtle, very happy with it. I'm really hoping, this is the main project I planned to knit on this break, but now with the road blocks I've hit with the anchor, that's going to take up a little bit more time. But I really have had to pull myself away from this whip. I've been just finding it so incredibly enjoyable, and I'm so excited for the finished object of the snowy forest, because even if, it's going to be cold in Ottawa for longer. I cry when I see people in other climates say, it's almost spring, you guys, but here in Toronto it actually does feel like it's almost spring, but it's warmer here. It's farther south than Ottawa. And also, I can still wear this as like an overlayer in the spring. Maybe I'm not wearing it under my thick winter coat, but I can wear this over a long sleeve or a t-shirt. Oh, a note on the yarn. This is also old stash. Well, old for me. I started knitting for real about a year ago. This is Quince & Co. Lark in Damson. I've been enjoying it, but I bought this on sale before I learned of the controversy that at the time was recent about Quince & Company's business practices. And I feel a little hesitant to just kind of talk about this yarn, arguably promote it without kind of giving that disclaimer that a lot of people have since not felt comfortable supporting them or purchasing from them after the controversy about, I'm not going to try and paraphrase and then describe the situation wrong, but there was a controversy about their business practices, and I trust that you guys are all people with good heads on your shoulders who can make decisions for yourself, but I do recommend that you look that up before you support them, but no judgment either way. I trust that you can make decisions for yourself. For me, I'm obviously going to use up stash, and I have a sweater's quantity of worsted weight yarn that I'm going to use. But I do think that without an update and maybe news of potential change or, actions showing that there have been changes, I'm not sure I would purchase from them again for a little while, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's my disclaimer on the yarn. And that's the Snowy Forest pullover that I'm really enjoying. Oh, just to comment on this yarn, it's not scratchy, it's not soft. It's good to work with for this kind of thing. But it kind of made me finally realize what other knitters have said about yarns feeling dry to the touch. This is a dry touch yarn. See, that's going over there. And from there, so normally I can only have one pair of socks on the needles at a time because of things I will talk about in a little bit in my acquisition section. But I cast on this pair of socks, which is literally just rib, not very exciting. This is going to eventually be the Rumfiest sock by Bloom & Create. It's on my Make 9. I'm obsessed with this pattern. I've been thinking about it for months. I'm really, really excited. It's the same as the Snowy Forest. It's something that I've really been wanting to cast on for so long. I finally got to do it. I'm like, yeah, I love this. But the Rumfiest sock. But as you can see, it's literally just rib. And this is the Emily C. Gillies. Is this helpful? Can you see that depth of color? I don't think it's picking up the way I want it to, but it's so gorgeous and it's so soft and I love it so much. But I cast this on because I really, really wanted to, and I'm finally able to have 2 socks on the go at once. Because I had a case of cast-onitis, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to frog all of it back and just redo it because this is 64 stitches on 2.5mm needles. I think that's too big for ribbing for me, for the top band. I think I might stop, do it again and do a 60 stitch or even a 56 stitch, and then just increase for that first round after the ribbing to the 64 to then have the right stitch count to follow the chart for the color work. Because I think this is superwash merino and nylon, 2.5mm needle. I normally wear a 56 on a vanilla sock, and I think it's just going to be too much. I mean, I have wide calves, and they get wide very quickly. It's a family trait. All got strong calves. We're very good at walking uphill. But maybe this will be more comfortable, but I think they're going to be too loose, and I just don't want... I have so many too loose hand-knit socks, which is better than having them be too tight, don't get me wrong. But I think, yeah, I think I might frog it and redo it. Also because, once again, I just packed this in my bag. I just tossed this in my suitcase to come home and was like, I'm going to start knitting the Rumphius sock. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. Ignore my anchor sweater. Ignore my other whips. Cast on something new, contrary to how I've lived my whole life as a knitter the past year. And finished the ribbing, and before I decided that I might frog this, I realized I didn't pack any of the other contrast colors. It's a colorwork sock pattern. I only packed this one. That's all I did. So, poor planning and cast-onitis is the theme of this video. So yeah, that's the update. This was the Emily C. Gillies Luck of the Draw January, one of the minis from the Luck of the Draw January Yarn Club. So happy I did it. Highly recommend their yarn. They're a Canadian dyer, free, untracked shipping across Canada, and I think maybe, I mean, you can still get it shipped elsewhere, but I'm quite pleased. For when I'm very much looking forward to when I have the whole set. Not as many projects on my needles, you know, when I cast off the anchor for real, finish a mushroom sock, and really get to focus on my snowy forest and this guy. I think it'll be good. I'm really looking forward to having these socks. And I want my thick, warm colorwork socks before it gets too warm, so gotta think about that. But yeah, that's my other cast on. And then, oh ho ho, did you think we were done? No, there's one more. So what happened was, so my knitting plans for break war, I packed those, you know, the 2 sock whips in my bag, you know, just in case, and I ended up knitting on them, so that was good. But I was thinking, finish the anchor sweater by yesterday, and then my main whips would be the snowy forest, and I would cast this on. Which is the Ripple bralette. It's kind of scrunched, as you can see. Which is the Ripple bralette by Jessie Made Designs, aka Jessie May Martinson. I mean, she's famous. Everybody knows her. You know who she is. So this is the Ripple bralette. And I'm knitting this on the Love Stitch Fibers non-superwash sock, which is 75% non-superwash wool, 25% nylon. This is a new yarn indie dyer based out of Maryland in the US, who's behind the Love Stitch Knits podcast, which I highly recommend. And this was a one-of-a-kind / oopsie colorway, it was available at a discounted price. And so a few months ago I was feeling sorry for myself, so I bought this. What I realized was I didn't have any easy on-the-go whips. Can't cable from a chart on my boyfriend's couch without the chart in front of me while still being present in the conversation. I don't want to be taking that giant men's sweater on the bus with me. And I ran out of Toadstool sock to knit and Rumphius sock to knit. So this cast on got bumped up, and this has been my new on the go one. I cast this on Saturday because on Sunday I met with Emily from High Fiber Knits for the first time for coffee and knitting, and I had an absolutely wonderful time. She's so lovely. 3 hours went by in the blink of an eye. I was shocked to see how much time had passed, but I wanted an easy conversational whip that was very portable for when I met her. And so I started this, and it's a twisted rib band at the bottom. This is an incredible, I think it's meant to be worn with 8 inches of negative ease, which I think is 20 centimeters, more or less. Yeah. And I'm so grateful that 10 centimeters equals 4 inches, because that's made the conversion in my head so much easier. So it's a twisted rib bottom band. And in pretty much every other circumstance, when a pattern has called for twisted rib, I have ignored that and done 1x1 rib, because I don't really like twisted rib very much. I think it's overrated. I think it's kind of annoying. I think it's kind of overrated, and it's kind of not worth the trouble for the effect. And I enjoy 1x1 rib, and I can usually get it neat enough that it doesn't look wonky and it doesn't bother me. However, because this whole thing is in 3x3 rib, I thought that the twisted rib band would be a really nice contrast. I thought that it might be good to have a little bit less of a flexible one at the bottom to kind of keep it secure. And also, if Jessie May says to do twisted rib, I'm going to do twisted rib. So I had the 3x3 rib to work on when I saw Emily, and it was great. Yeah, this is how much I've done. It moves quickly because it's such a negative ease garment that it's pretty small. And I'm absolutely in love with the yarn. Can you see that? The speckles, the blue and the red, and the light green background? There's more over here. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I'll probably say it more in the future. Tiara of the Love Stitch Fibers and Knits and podcast has such an incredible eye for color. I'm so happy to have been able to purchase this skein of her yarn. Just stunning, and it's just the perfect amount of color for me, and this feels like a really good use of my very special skein. And this is going to be a very useful experiment to see if I can wear wool next to my body in hot weather. Because I see so many people knit like the My Favorite Things camisoles or other tight-fitted Jessie May summer garments in like 100% wool. You know, like everyone knits these things, or not everyone, but so many people knit these things in the Knitting for Olive 100% merino or the cotton merino, and say that wool is temperature regulating and moisture wicking, and that's why it's okay and they're comfortable. And I do notice those properties in wool sometimes, especially in my socks. But also, I routinely get very sweaty in my wool garments when I'm running late to class and wearing them, to the point where I noticed the other day I fell through the armpits on one of my sweaters from like running to class while wearing them and then sweating along, and then, sorry if that's too much information. But I'm very curious to see if I can wear this kind of thing next to skin in 30-degree weather, which we often get here in the summer, which is I think in the 90s for my Fahrenheit friends. And so I'm knitting this with the expectation that, as an experiment, with the expectation that it'll be a very good underlayer in the winter, because wool is not itchy to me when it's cold out. Even the most woolly, rustic stuff is not itchy to me when I'm cold, but it is when I'm hot. So this will definitely be good in the winter, and then maybe it'll be good in the summer. So I'm currently debating on how long I should knit it before I separate to do the front, because if I knit it to be worn as a pure bralette and short, and maybe not something I would wear comfortably on its own out and about, then I have enough left over to knit another Jessie May top. So I get 2 for 1 out of this ball, which is fantastic value for money. Or do I knit this really long, betting that I can wear wool next to skin in summer, and then have it also just kind of work as maybe like a tank top. So that's kind of the thought process here, but also I just find this so enjoyable. I'm knitting this on the recommended needle size, which is a 3.5. It's fingering weight pattern. As you can see, it's on a pretty open gauge, but I do imagine that this wool is going to bloom a little bit more and block out, and I'm thrilled. I love it. And this, again, kind of goes back to what I was saying about how much I've been enjoying knitting from stash. And this past month of whips and knitting has been 2 of my oldest stash yarns that I've purchased that aren't the things that I've inherited from my grandmother or my mother. The Quince & Co. that I'm using for the Snowy Forest and my Drops Air that'll be a basic raglan. Those are the two of the oldest yarns I've had in my stash. And then this and the Emily C. Gillies yarn are 2 of my most recent acquisitions. So I've just had so much love for my stash. I wish I could offer you a more articulate thought on that, more nuanced take, but I love loving what I have. I love appreciating what I have, and I love working with what I have. Because I got these things with a lot of thought and a lot of intention because they bring me joy and I thought would be practical. And I would like to knit down my stash and have a smaller stash in general. But I would also like to get back to a place where, yeah, sometimes I see a pattern and I think, oh great, I have the perfect thing for that. But I really, really like also buying something that I'm really excited about and casting on with it very quickly after so that it doesn't kind of just get dusty on a shelf. I don't fall out of love with it and it doesn't become like elevated to too special to use status, because these are tools for my craft. And yeah, sometimes they're fancy or luxury, and yeah, often I want to have the right project that's going to make that shine that I'm really going to enjoy. But what I'm doing is crafting and using tools and materials, and I want to use them. I want to, I want to do this to its fullest. So I've been just so enamored with it. I've just loved these materials. I keep stopping to pause and admire them. I've been loving the feel of them in my hands. I'm so excited to have these garments very soon and to cast on with even more stash. So those are my project updates. It's getting a little bit dark, so I'm going to try and wrap it up. Wow. The makings of a not bad sunset though. And yeah, before we get into I almost had an acquisitions free episode, but I do have a couple acquisitions. They're not yarn though, so that's interesting. But those are my whips. Before I get to the very end of the video, and also if this is the point where you leave us, that's totally fine, but I have a couple podcast recommendations. So I wanted to get those in before acquisitions. And my podcast recommendations are, well, my thought process is here, if you've watched this far, maybe you like me, maybe you really hate me. You're watching this with to fuel some rage, in which case I respect that. But I'm assuming if you've watched this far, you find me at least decently engaging. And if that is the case, I think you will really like these other 2 podcasters. And they are Naomi Joy of the NJ Knits podcast, and also Madeline of the Knit with Madeline podcast, for 2 different reasons. If you watch me and you think she's fun, but you'd like it if I was more interesting, then you're going to love Naomi. I find Naomi's podcasts so engaging and they make me happy. I think she's very aptly named being Naomi Joy because she's a very joyful person to watch and a very irreverent person, and someone who approaches knitting not from a perfectionist angle, but specifically not to be obstructed by perfection. And so if you watch my videos and you relate to how I kind of cast on with abandon, play fast and loose with gauge, leave mistakes in sometimes, you're going to love Naomi's approach. She knits the most cool creative patterns and mends and spins and is great. And I think you'd like her. And I highly recommend that you check Naomi out. The link will be down below. And at the same time, if you like me just kind of in general, you're going to like Madeline because she DM'd me on Instagram, I think 2-3 months ago, saying, hey, I watched your podcast and I actually also have X, Y, and Z traits in common. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting. Thanks for watching. And we got to talking, and the more we talked, the more similarities in our life experiences came out, which is so fun and wacky. For example, not to delve too much into personal details about the 2 of us, but for example, she's currently living in Belgrade, Serbia, which is not a very common place people go to live for a year, who aren't from there, or don't have family there. And my grandfather's from Belgrade, which is kind of a lot of, and then that's one of the looser connections of the two of us. So I thought that was very fun. But then she just started her podcast. She has 2 episodes out the last time I checked. I thoroughly enjoyed both of them. But I was watching her, and probably influenced by the fact that I know we have a lot in common. The vibes, it was eerily similar to, I think, me and a lot of my mannerisms, how I speak, my sense of humor. And so we're just very similar people. So it's absolutely wonderful that we were brought together, and I have new friends based on this hobby and this podcast, which was my goal. I mean, how wonderful is it that I got to meet up with a knitting friend while here in Toronto and knit with someone in person? It was just so wonderful to talk about knitting and talk about patterns and all the things that we love about this craft. But also I'm connected with somebody who's normally from the US and is currently in Belgrade and, halfway across the world from me, and find out so many different points of connection. Same with Naomi, wonderful person. We talk fairly often now, who's so much fun and so interesting, and I really think that you guys will enjoy both of them. So, highly recommend that you go and watch their podcasts, check them out. So, yeah, all right. From there, acquisitions. We almost had a no acquisitions episode, because I've just been so happy with I don't want more yarn. I always want more yarn, but I want to get through what I have. So the sock thing. I don't have any needles below a 3mm that beyond my 9-inch circulars. I have a pair of 9-inch circular 2.25mm needles and a pair of 9-inch circular 2.5mm needles. Because I don't knit a lot of fingering weight patterns, or if I do, they're like at looser gauges like this. The thing is that means that doing sock toes, it's murder. Because as you know, if anyone's ever knit with the 9-inch circulars, after a certain point on the toe decreases, you just don't have enough cable, and you're pushing stitches, and it's just a mess. It's kind of impossible. So what I used to do is I'd only ever have one sock on the go, and I would just keep the other pair of 9-inch circulars handy, and when it got to a point where the circumference was too small, I would just kind of knit back and forth between the two, so I was almost working with like an 18-inch circumference, like the 2 9s together. That also wasn't very good for the needles. It meant that my tension was really wonky for the toes, and it was like an okay temporary solution, but it's not a permanent solution. It also meant that I always had to have the other pair of needles handy for when I got to the toes. So I thought it was time that I got myself some long circulars, and these are both Chiagu 100cm/40-inch needles. This is a 2.25, this is a 2.5, so that I can magic loop my sock toes, and also do top socks, because a pattern that I've wanted to cast on for so long is the acorn sock pattern. I even have the yarn, talked about this in the past if you watched my Make 9 video, but I needed either both pairs of the circulars free, the 9-inch ones, to do that, or I just got myself one of these, which is great. If you saw my Instagram story, I suddenly had a moment of panic after planning this for a couple weeks, and I was like, oh no, these are going to be far too long of a needle. I'm sorry, there's a lot of glare and you can't really tell. It'll be far too long. But then I thought on magic looping anyway, so I put a poll on my Instagram. And most people said it was going to be fine, but it was like a closer split than I was expecting. I was expecting like 4 people to say one, and then like 20 people to say the other, and instead it was like a 16-25 split, which was closer than I was expecting, but most people said it was going to be fine. And also, this means that I've been thinking about knitting a Friday tee, and this means that I can also knit the collar of a Friday tee. So this is just a really useful tool to have. They were $16 total, which was a little painful for 2 pairs of needles, but Chiagu, and I'm going to get a lot of use out of them, and they're going to make my knitting experience so much better, because you know I love socks, so I'm very happy I did that. And then significantly more exciting, I got a Gleaner. Watch out, sweater pills, I'm coming for you. I'm sorry, I'm in such a silly, goofy mood, but I'm happy. I hope it doesn't bug. I hope that it's okay. I hope that the energy's fine. But I'm having a good time. Gleaner, cleaning, and it's a Gleaner on the go. Oh, look at it. I love it. Do you see this? I love it. It has 3 attachments. And it's portable, so you have, I'm sorry, you can see there's still some lint because I was depilling a gray sweater, but you have these two attachments that fit here when you're using it, and then it also has this clothes brush / lint brush attachment, and it comes in this little bag, and it's a Gleaner on the go, and it was $15, and I used a gift card, and I've been waiting for these to come back in stock in either of the stores that I have gift cards for, because that's the only gift that people give me, and that's how I basically fund this hobby. And they keep going out of stock, and I have to sneeze, hold on. They keep coming out of stock, and finally they were back in stock. I was in Toronto, and so my boyfriend and I, we walked down to Yarns Untangled, and I picked this up, and I'm so pleased. I've already depilled 2 sweaters. One of my sweaters, my gray cozy classic raglan, I wear so often, but the yarn with the alpaca content, it hasn't held up very well. And the underarm here was so pilled, it looked like it was meant to be a teddy bear, fuzzy, maybe bouclé sweater, and at that point it was too obvious, and I stopped wearing it until I could get a depiller. And it's not perfectly pill-free, I still have to get better at using it, but it's so refreshed and looks so much nicer and neater and back to the sweater that I knit and I loved, and I really feel like this is the kind of tool that contributes to the longevity of my knits and how wearable I find them, and it keeps me reaching for them for ages and really creating a wardrobe that's going to last me for years. So I'm thrilled about this. Also, I can use it on store-bought sweaters. There's 3 different attachments for different fiber contents. I'm thrilled, and it was $15. And I would like to give a shout out to the lovely people at Yarns Untangled. Such good vibes in there. I think they're in a temporary location right now, and it's a wonderful, tiny little space full of fiber, and such a wonderful person was working there who we had a very wonderful conversation about the Gleaner. While I was there, I looked at the yarn, I didn't buy any. And I was chatting to my boyfriend about what I'm going to do with that one skein of merino single that I don't know what to do with, and that's what I'm thinking about using for the Friday tea. And the person working there overheard, and then, started recommending some cowl patterns or some things that they'd used in order to knit with single ply merino single before. And it was just such a wonderful experience. Thoroughly enjoyed talking to someone who really knew their stuff and was so inclusive and kind and welcoming. And I'm really looking forward to going to Yarns Untangled. And they stock so many different Canadian yarns, which is so great to see. And I am really looking forward to continuing to shop there for a very long time. So if you're in Toronto, or if you're ever planning on going to Toronto, I think it's a great place to go for the vibes. It's also in Kensington Market, which is a great place to be in my opinion, for food and loud city ambiance. And if you want Canadian yarns, and also just great yarns in general and great people. So, and a Gleaner on the go, $15 Canadian. So that is my knitting podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. There's been a spike in subscribers recently, and I'm blown away. And if you made it to this far into the podcast, I have a special question for you. What do you think of mini sets? Specifically, sock mini sets, like 5 skeins of 20-gram superwash nylon sock yarns, and or 5 20-gram DK weight skeins. Do you like those? Because I think that's what I want to do for a giveaway if we get to 1,000, which feels like hubris to say and to start planning, because I remember a few months ago in my first 3 episodes, I think I had 5 subscribers, and I was talking to 20 people. I appreciated every single one of you, and I got so excited whenever there was a new subscriber, and honestly, I still do. But it feels like hubris to be like, oh yeah, when we get to 1,000, I'll do a giveaway. But when we get to 1,000, I'll do a giveaway. And I want to know, do you guys like mini sets? Let me know if you do, and let me know if you have a strong preference for DK or fingering / sock weight, because I have ideas. So that's what I'm thinking. But if you guys would prefer 100 grams of a DK or a fingering, I mean, it's meant to be for you. So I'd like to maybe, do what you guys want. So that's everything I have to say. I really hope you're doing well. I hope you are happy. I hope you are healthy. I hope you are safe. And that things are good. That if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, that the midwinter blues have not gotten you down. I hope you're getting lots of sun. I hope you and your loved ones are happy. And I'll see you in the next one. And I have a fun special video planned very soon. So, bye!